Hi, this is Eric from longboxreview.com, and I have with me again Mr. Peter Rios. Hi, Peter.
Hey, Eric.
Thank you for joining me. We talked in the last episode just about whatever we wanted to talk about, really.
Yeah.
But we intended really to talk about a specific comic book series called Secret Identities from Image Comics from 2015. But we had, at least I did. I had so much fun just kind of talking whatever with you that it would probably be best to break up the episodes as we did here into the two parts. And but this episode we will be talking. I teased it last episode, but we will be talking about Secret Identities here on this show. But before I do that, because I was trying to say that word, negligent. Last episode, Peter, I apologize, but why don't you remind the fine folks, the fine listeners out there, what it is that you do on the interwebs, because you have your own podcast and you have a website. Why don't you tell them a little bit about that and where they can go to find out more?
Well, what I do on the interwebs is I stalk Gal Gadot. So in love with her.
Hey, speaking of that, did you? Sorry to interrupt, but did you see the little the video and the picture going around with her? She's in a signing table with a signing line with the Justice League people, and that little girl dressed up as Wonder Woman walks up to her, and the look on Gal Gadot's face is just it's so precious. And I when I saw that, I put a tweet out there saying that she's now my new favorite person. She looks like she's just having a wonderful time, and I'd really like to know what she said to that little girl, but I'm sure it was very cool.
Yeah, I mean, and continuing that video, it also shows, I assume, a mother and a son, or an older woman and a younger boy taking a picture with Ben Affleck.
Oh, right.
And that boy is in tears.
Yes.
He's so crying. And I'm like, and I get it. I get it. And I really feel like this is where those movies matter, like, look at that guy. He knows that actor plays Batman. That little girl knows that actress plays Wonder Woman. For all we know, she thinks she is Wonder Woman,
Mm-hmm.
So, us adult, stick in the muds, we get caught up in, it's not my Superman, it's not my Spider-Man, it's not my Captain America, it's not my Wonder Woman. Nah. Linda Carter, Christopher Reeve. And it's like, okay, but you know what? That's their Superman, and that's their Wonder Woman and Batman and Iron Man and well, I guess we've only really had one Iron Man, but that video right there shows why none of our criticisms matter.
Yes.
Because it's like, that was just awesome. I mean, it's one thing to see the little girl, like Gal Gadot, she is so responsible with her role. She knows what it means. It's very much like Melissa Benoist too. She knows what it means to be Supergirl when she's in front of certain crowds, and that, so the way, like what you said, the way she was talking to that girl, she gets the responsibility and the power that playing Wonder Woman has, Same thing with Ben Affleck, like whether he's the best Batman or not doesn't matter. That kid was so excited to meet him. And I think about what I would have been like had I met Christopher Reeve as a kid.
Yeah.
And so that was great. But yeah, totally in love with her. And I didn't even feel this way about her in Batman versus Superman. I thought she was awesome. But after seeing that movie, seeing Wonder Woman, I was like, she made my little heart pitter patter. So no, but what I do on the internet is other than watch YouTube videos all day, I do a podcast called The Daily Rios, which you can find at thedailyrios.com. I did an experiment for the first year back in 2012 to 2013, where I did 5 episodes a week, a true daily show. Well, kind of taking like the Daily Show model where they did 5 shows a week. Some episodes were 20 minutes long. Some episodes were 6 seconds long. And I think it was one of the listeners, I can't remember if it was Bill or Chris, they called it podcast verite, where it was sort of like, you never knew what you were going to get. It could be about comics. It could be about theater. It could be about my life. It could be about my girlfriend. It could be about some quote from a movie or whatever. And I had fun with it. I had fun playing with the podcast medium as much as I did. And now I just ramble about comics and theater and TV shows and stuff like that. So
do you plan to get back to the kind of experimental, or I kind of hesitate to use that word, but yeah, playing with the format like you did? Yeah, I tried to. In future episodes? I tried to. I have some of it just comes down to not being beholden to one topic. Although it's mostly comic book focused, it ain't called the Daily Rios for nothing. And it's not listed under personal journal for nothing. Like, if you think all I'm going to do is talk about comics, well, then you're not paying attention. I half want to, I think there's an episode I want to talk about. I've been doing the Master Cleanse, a modified version of the Master Cleanse for the past, what's it been, about 30 days, I guess. And in the first 20 some days, I lost 10 pounds and just trying to get myself back in shape. And I thought, that might be, that could actually be an interesting topic. Someone might listen to that and it could help them, physically or whatever. Or like, I don't know, just different things like that. Like, I feel like it's hard to do the daily thing. It's hard. Doing a daily podcast by yourself is hard. Yeah.
We did it on CGS. We could record 2 episodes one night and 3 episodes the next, or something like that. Or we only had to record 4 because we already had a 5th. But that's with a whole bunch of people. You don't have to prep so much. But what I've always really wanted it to be was some kind of daily post, whether it was a podcast or a site post, maybe a picture I put together, or an written interview, or written review, or something. Like, it didn't always have to be a podcast. Like that, I could probably see more as being a daily thing, but it could be a picture I've taken out in the wild of a superhero thing here in Philadelphia. That's truly what I wanted the site to be. But again, time and time. So.
Oh, believe me, I know exactly. Yeah. I was always impressed. I was super impressed. There's no really good adjective here, Peter, but I was impressed to the nth degree that you were able to do a daily show for that first year, 5 days a week. So you put out something, and more importantly to me, it wasn't always the same thing. It wasn't always the same format. It wasn't always the same length. It wasn't always the same topic.
Right.
And every time you put out something a little different, I'm like, God damn it. I wish I was as creative as you were.
I think I tap danced on one episode and I sang on a couple others. Yeah. I was just like, whatever. I'm just going to try something.
Yeah. That's one of the things I love about this medium, the podcasting medium, is that, you're not, you're not tied to a specific thing. I choose to be to a certain degree by the very nature of the show that I do. Mm-hmm. But there are times where I want to, expand or, go outside that box a little bit.
Yeah.
And it was because of your show, that I did the gutters thing.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's right.
Which I haven't done in a long time, which I need to get back to. But, I'm always impressed, by the things that you put out there, whether it's on your podcast or even on Twitter, just the things that you're doing. I'm always just like I said, I'm impressed with the direction you take, the method you use. It's a very interesting show, to bring it back to your podcast. So if people haven't, checked out Peter's show, they really should. If you want an interesting slice of life, a little bit of comics, a little bit of, multimedia type stuff, like with your Star Trek: The Next Generation season recaps you've been doing, all different kinds of things. I mean, pretty much if you like popular culture, I think you'll get a good taste of things from Peter's perspective. Cool.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So, okay. So speaking of comics, we originally were going to get together, because you said you had some free time, on your hands during the summer, to where we could get together and talk. And so, while we were conversing back and forth, okay, what are we going to talk about? Do you want to talk about this? Have you read this? That little back and forth that I do with my guests on occasion when we're going to talk about stuff. I threw out some things, and one of which was, I think I said specifically, I've been dying to talk about Secret Identities.
Mm-hmm.
And I was actually going to do this as a solo thing, and then I just kind of threw that out there to you, and then you're like, okay, basically. But had you read this book before?
Nope. This was completely just because of you saying that it was something you wanted to talk about, and I've certainly I've mentioned a bunch of comics along the way that people have read, and I thought, you know what, he wants to talk about it, so I'm going to read it.
Well, I appreciate that. I hope it didn't cost you too much to get those issues and read them.
Nope.
But all right. Well, I hope this. We'll get into it in just a minute, Peter. But I hope it's satisfied.
I hated it. I hated it, and this podcast is over. No, I'm kidding.
All right. Okay. But let me give just a brief introduction of the series, and who's behind it, and then we can jump in with some. Let's do some general thoughts, maybe, and maybe we can then touch on some specific things from the issues.
Great.
Okay. So, Secret Identities, a 2015 comic book published by Image Comics, written by Jay Faerber and Brian Joines, with art by, I had to look up how to pronounce his name, Peter, Greek artist, Ilias Kyriazis.
Okay.
I hope I did that somewhat correctly. And then on colors, we had Charlie Kirchhoff on issue 1, and then Ron Riley on the rest of the issues, with Ed Dukeshire on letters. And so the Secret Identities is, I picked it up actually in late 2015 when the trade came out. I actually remember seeing it in previews and going, hey, new superhero universe, new superhero group, it's not DC or Marvel. And I'm always loving that. I'm always looking for those kinds of things. Mm-hmm. I'm 40 something years old, and I still love superheroes, and I'm not ashamed to say it. That's where I started. That's what drew me into comics, reading, Spider-Man, the Avengers, and then all the DC stuff. And then I became a DC fan for life. Well, so far anyway. But, and as time went on and I grew up and grew older, more mature, I got into non-superhero comics, and those are all great. But still, I have, my heart of hearts, Peter, superheroes still get me. I still want to read stories about superheroes, even after all these years.
Right. No, I feel the same way.
And so, like I said, when I find a new take or a new perspective, a new interpretation of the superhero genre, I am immediately interested. I'm not always satisfied, unfortunately. There was a book several years back called Super that came out. It was, I think only like 3 or 4 issues came out in print, and the 5th one was only delivered digitally. But it was an interesting concept, interesting characters, but the execution was a little off for me. However, Secret Identities, as I said, when I got this in 2015, I got the trade. I read it and I remember feeling kind of wowed by this book. And I really liked the characters. I liked the story that they were telling. And then I got to the end of the 7-issue run that I found out was the end of the run of this book. So, I'm reading along in that trade, and I get those final few pages at the end. I'm like, what? I was so disappointed when I learned that it actually had been canceled. But it made enough of an impression that even 2 years later, I was thinking, I need to talk about this on the show. And so, like I said, I just kind of threw this out as a kind of a, well, what do you think about this kind of thing? Because I'd been thinking about it recently, and fortunately, Peter agreed to talk about it. So I am, and just so people know that listen to the show, I do not really talk about the subject matter with the guest beforehand, because I want to discover what Peter and my other guests that I've done this with, what they think about this book that we're going to talk about. I want to discover it along with you as you listen.
Right.
So I have no idea what Peter's going to say about this book. So it's going to be a lot of fun, I hope. But I really enjoyed it. So Peter, what did you think about this book when you first started reading it, when you picked it up?
Well, when you told me that one of the writers was Jay Faerber, I like his work. He did a small stretch on the Titans. He has written a bunch of books for Image, Noble Causes, Dynamo 5, which gave us the artist Mahmoud Asrar. He also is currently doing a book called Copperhead that I haven't delved into just yet. But I like his stuff, the few things I've read of it. I was like, okay, so that gave me a nice in. And then I read just a few blurbs about the overall series, and I said, oh, okay, cool. It sounds like it's really, my initial thought was it's playing in the superhero genre. It's purposely playing within the way superhero comics are written, the history of superhero comics, some of the tropes. And that was enough for me to go, yeah, I'm definitely going to read it. It's 7 issues. I can do that. And then I came away with, it's an enjoyable series. I think the strongest thing for me was the artwork by the end of the 7 issues. There are some interesting panel layouts, and I just liked the artwork by Ilias. And there are a number of things in it that speak to the things that I like about superhero comics when they reference the way superhero comics are constructed. There's a lot of parallels, and that's a whole lot of fun with this series.
Yeah,
a lot of different archetypes that we know. And then by the end, I sort of felt by issue 6, I could tell that they were not going to be able to wrap it up because they had more of a long-term goal with it. And I thought, okay, well, what's that last issue going to be? And the last issue is it's quick. It's a little bit of a hodgepodge mess. As they try to wrap up some things and tease other things, and the way they wrap up the story felt not as logical as I thought maybe it was going to go. But overall, I'm glad I read it. I don't think. I think if you're in the superhero genre, if you're just someone that just likes to read different superhero comics, I mean, this is just 7 issues. I think you'd enjoy it.
Well, good. I'm glad you feel that way. And in fact, the the way you described the book in general there, especially when you talked about, you came away from it, liking probably the art more so than the story, aspects of it. Quite honestly, on the reread, the second time through, I felt the same way. So
yeah,
so that interested me. Why did I have a different reaction now 2 years later to this book? Because I remember specifically when I first read it, I was just completely enamored with the concept. And, like I said, I couldn't wait to talk about it. Just didn't fit into the schedule. Cause I like to, I don't just read a book and then immediately get on the microphone and start talking about it. I read the book and then I reread the book and I take notes on the book and then I reread the book again. I'll, alter my notes or add things to my notes. I do a little bit of background reading. I read some articles with the creative team just to get a sense of what they were doing, why they were doing it, to inform what it is that I'm going to talk about.
And on that level, they completely succeeded. Everything they said in those interviews, they did. They wanted to make a book that was specifically about superheroes, but the strength of Jay's writing and his co-writer, but from what I remember from other books that Jay has written, Jay Faerber, is he's good about he likes to delve into the interplay, the connections between the characters. It's not always about the superhero stuff. It's about how they relate to each other and how they relate to the world around them. And that part of it was very compelling. And the artwork just helped all of that, Yeah. I thought the artwork was strong in its story, helping to tell the story that the writers wanted to tell. So I think that's why it says specifically created by Jay Faerber, Brian Jones, and Ilias how do you say his last name? Kyriazis? Kyriazis, yes. They all three get the creator nod, and rightfully so.
Yeah. So let me give a little more background on this so people understand. So this book is about a team, a superhero team. You got your analogs or familiar analogs in this team, many of them anyway. They're called the Frontline, and this is a superhero group that is based in Canada, which is kind of neat. It's not, it's not in the U.S. It's not New York. It's not some made up place, but they're based in Canada, but they're not a Canadian team, so it's not Alpha Flight again. It's, these characters were brought together by this event, this alien invasion that happened, 2 years prior to where the book opens. And, so because of, and I want to talk about that in a minute, Peter, but, what that means exactly. But, so their base is in Canada. I think was it Toronto or Montreal? I can't remember. I think it was Toronto. Yeah, looks like.
Yeah.
So the Frontline is composed of the following people: Luminary, which is kind of like the Superman analog in a way. She's got a red, white, and blue costume to go with it. She's the daughter of the U.S. president in this universe. And Punchline is next. She's kind of the jokester of the group.
She's the female Guy Gardner.
Oh, there you go. I actually thought of Spider-Man in the sense of her witty banter that she would throw out there.
Her brashness, yeah.
Yeah. And then one of the characters, was it one of the characters? I'm getting confused as to some of the things that's actually in the book and some of the stuff that I read in the letters pages in the single issues that I read. Because like I said, I got this in trade 2 years ago and only just recently, and I think this is why I wanted to talk about this more recently, Peter. I got the single issues. I found the back issues at at the comic book shop in Spokane, Washington, that I used to go to all the time. And so I got those and read through those prior to our conversation. And I love reading the back matter of comics, when they have it. A lot of comics these days don't have that, but these did. And it was just, a couple pages of letters from people for a few issues. Obviously, on a 7-issue run, they didn't get that many letters. They didn't have that much opportunity. But it was interesting, some of the things that they brought out. But someone referred to Punchline as, oh shoot, now that I'm talking about it. Oh, an acrobat. The acrobat type of superhero, which I didn't quite understand that reference, given what we see of this character in the book, but maybe you'll tell me how I'm wrong about that, Peter. Another one is Hellet, who is like a cybernetic warrior type person. Gaijin is an alien, who is involved with, Japanese culture, hence the name. And Vesuvius is our kind of like our tank of the group. He's the big, molten man type character, I guess. Rock and molten lava type character. Rundown, which is a cool name for a Flash type character. And his little secret, because Secret Identities is not just, it's a play on words, right? Or play on the concept, the superhero concept, because it's not just about getting to know the non-mask characters, the non-superhero aspects of these people, but it's also about their secrets that they're hiding from the world and each other in many cases.
Right.
So with Rundown, I thought that was an interesting idea, what they did with him. We'll get to that. There's Recluse, which is your vigilante, your Batman-like character. And then there's Crosswind, who is the new member of the group, who joins in issue 1, and he's got wind powers. But here's the twist. Crosswind is a mole. He's the Terra, of the group, if you understand that reference to the new Teen Titans. And I know Peter does for sure. But here in this case, and this was something that, Faerber joins, and, I have to look at my notes every time I say his name for some reason. Kyriazis, specifically talked about how they wanted to do, a Terra-like character, a traitor in the group, but do it up front. Do it so that we, the readers, know it right up front, instead of the slow buildup that we got with Terra in the new Teen Titans storyline. So, Peter, what did you think of that? What do you think, given what I just said about their intent? What are your thoughts about that? Especially since, like I said, they're modeling it in some ways. It's not the first time we've seen a traitor in a group story. Terra wasn't in the new Teen Titans, but to me, that was a huge reveal back in the day when I was reading that story.
Yeah.
And now we have this play on that, this alteration, this interpretation.
Right. And Marv Wolfman is very specific, where he says, Terra, during the build up to the Judas contract, for the new Teen Titans in the 80s, 1984, as a matter of fact, was not a traitor, because she did not join the group and then was swayed afterwards. She was, as you said, a mole, and which is a whole different thing. And for a couple of issues, we didn't know we didn't know what she was going to be. And then there was a reveal, and then you're like, oh my God. And then you had to wait like almost a year till that storyline played out, until she revealed herself to the rest of the Titans. But with this issue, and I think even in the text page of the first issue, they clearly mention the Judas contract.
Yeah.
Yeah, as you said. So I didn't read too much. I didn't read the interviews prior to reading the first issue I think I read a lot of the interviews after. So I knew they were playing around with that concept, but I wasn't sure in which way. I almost got the feeling, and I think the first issue kind of speaks to this, that Crosswind was trying to get onto this team. That's pretty much what you get from that first issue, right? Mm-hmm. He's trying to get onto the team. And then the last page, you realize what's going on. But prior to that last page, I almost was even curious as if the frontliners were a superhero team, but they were actually villains, and he was a good guy trying to get in so that he could reveal their secret. But then, obviously, with the last page, you're like, oh, okay, it truly is. He's a bad guy. So, so that was a nice twist for me reading it, because I didn't take I didn't take it quite at face value. I just kind of read it and see what came out with it. So that was interesting. It was interesting to see this character come in as a mole and to see how the other characters related to him, especially Recluse. I was like, I dug it. I thought that was a nice little way of building tension. And it certainly plays out in a number of the next issues too. So, that little hook was good. I thought it was a nice way to get into the book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You mentioned the text piece in issue 1, so I wanted to just read real quick a couple excerpts from that. This is Brian Joines writing this in within the first issue of the book. This is a book that will wholeheartedly embrace the idea of the superhero without resorting to a deconstruction of the genre, while also serving as a mystery, a series of character studies, and a look at the sliding scale of good versus evil with all the gray in between. And all wrapped in a package of exciting new characters, electrifying artwork, and gorgeous colors. It may not offer easy answers, but it promises to be a wild ride. And then in the next paragraph, he does talk about the Judas Contract from New Teen Titans. As I said, this would follow the mole as a primary character, with the reader fully aware of his intentions and witness the steps he takes in his efforts to move or to destroy the team. The idea of full disclosure over what was essentially the book's main villain excited Joines, so the team decided to move forward with that concept. So, I don't know. Given that, Peter, do you think they succeeded in offering us a wild ride with all those various aspects?
Yeah, I mean, it's a series that I sort of wondered where they thought they were going to go beyond these 7 issues. They had a much longer goal, but a character as a mole and a character who's not very redeemable. I don't know how much play that would have gotten beyond maybe a year's worth of books.
Yeah.
Who knows? Maybe they could have stretched it out, but I liked that they hit on his true identity and what he was really doing on. They hit on that pretty quickly. Now the as you say, the play on the title of Secret Identities was also very fascinating, because each of them have something that they do not want the other person to figure out, and that's the part that I thought was really good world building, and because you got to give us a reason to care about these characters. Otherwise, why do we care about someone invading their team? Because if we didn't really get into who these people were, then you might just wind up rooting for Crosswind to demolish them. And that's something where there's been certain eras of comics where we are supposed to root for the villain or the bad guy or the anti-hero. Mm-hmm. But I didn't sit there and go, ooh, I wonder how he's going to kill them all. No, once we got to be familiar with who they are and what role they play, it was like, oh, look at that. They all have a secret. Luminary has like a power that she doesn't understand, and Punchline is a failed stand-up comic. Guy Jin, who reminded me very much of Starfire, has a brother who runs a crime organization. Vesuvius has, he keeps saying that he was actually from Pompeii, from the destruction of Pompeii, but there's some part of his history that he doesn't want revealed. You alluded to Rundown, the brilliant, when you're a speedster who can, run through the seconds of time, he has multiple families that he constantly runs back and forth to, and then by the end he gets a third. So that's fascinating. That really speaks to his character. Hellet was he's involved with like that secret organization that he thinks he has a bigger destiny, And then of course Recluse is the Bruce Wayne of the group, and it turns out he's a vampire spider, he's part vampire, part spider, and he has to eat people. So like that, all that stuff, the secrets beyond the secret identities and beyond the larger goal of like Crosswind invading the team, helped to keep each issue interesting.
Yeah, and that's so. One of the things that I did years ago, I was in grad school, and one aspect of my thesis that I wrote about was my fascination with superhero secret identities. So, like, you remember the old Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man series, right, from the 70s?
Yep.
I always felt like I was being given a bill of goods with that title because I mostly saw Spider-Man in it. Right? I wanted to see more about Peter Parker and his life and dealing with being Spider-Man.
Right.
Now, that was youthful ignorance, expecting Marvel to do that. But that idea always stuck with me over the years. And so whenever superhero comics would examine the people behind the masks, for example, I'm thinking of A Day in the Life, that New Teen Titans issue. I think it was number 8. Where that's pretty much all we got is all of those characters interacting with each other and their supporting cast members, but as their own identities, not their superhero identities. And there have been other things along the, over the years where, that idea has been, examined, but it's always been something that, fascinates me more than just the superheroics that I read month in and month out in my comics. And so, when I was doing my thesis, which was a creative writing exercise, I tried to focus more on those aspects, the other identities, the real identities, I guess. Although I know in some cases, like Batman, some fans tend to think of Batman as his real identity and Bruce Wayne as the mask. But, that aside, I think really that's the main aspect. Besides, like I said, we talked about the art a little bit. I'm sure we'll get into that more, but it was that aspect, how the characters, the secrets they were hiding from their teammates, from the world, how they interact with each other on a personal level. That was much more interesting to me than anything going, the plot, the driving force for the story, the fights with the villains that they had going on. Even more so than the Crosswind as Mole part of the storyline. That's the kind of stuff that I really wanted more of, and I was really looking forward to as I was reading, like I said, reading that trade for the very first time. And I get to issue 7 and realize, oh my God, I'm not going to get that any more than I already have. Right. I was really disappointed in that because that is, from a storytelling standpoint, that's the kind of stuff that I really, really love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's unfortunate they had to, wrap it up, but for its own little thing, 7 issues done, all 7 issues and then done. I think it works. I think they're trying to tell a certain story and they succeed.
Well, yeah, and of course, they intended to go longer than that. But I'm assuming sales weren't as good as they had hoped, and they had to wrap it up. That I think I remember reading that they had issues 7, 8, maybe 9. I'll have to look, but they already had those either drafted or pretty much done when they basically got the word that they couldn't continue past issue 7. And so then they had to basically rewrite issue 7 to be what it was. And then wrap quickly and unsatisfactorily or in my opinion, wrap it up so that they would have a cap to this series.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also something they did talk about in the letters pages. I think it was in issue 3 or 4. A reader wrote in and asked, "Well, how long do you think? Because you mentioned Crosswind, maybe a year's worth of issues they could get out of that story." But a reader asked that very question. Well, how long can how can the series be sustained under this particular premise? And I don't remember if it was Faerber or Joins who answered the letter, but they coyly responded with, "Well, you never know. Maybe Crosswind will end up changing him, his mind about these characters and his role and all that kind of stuff." Which would have been interesting, to see that play out in that way, because I think him within these 7 issues, he basically starts out as the mole, trying to reveal all this stuff, and then ends up finding out certain things about the group or certain characters of the group, or certain members, I should say, certain members of the group. So there's really not a whole lot of change that goes on with this character. He wasn't given enough time to do so. And quite frankly, none of the characters really changed all that much, except when we get to those last few pages and the reveals of what came out of it. We get hints of that, but no real, from a storytelling perspective, no real progression, no real character arc, unfortunately.
Right.
But they did have a plan. I mean, they were going to do more of this stuff. And like I said, it's unfortunate that they didn't get to go or get to that point. This comic could have gone on easily for several years, I think, given the characters involved and the way that they were playing around with the superhero concepts that they were playing around with.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Do you have any other things you want to throw out there generally before we dive into some of the things we liked about each issue?
No, I think I'm ready for the issue, but issue to issue.
Would you, let's assume that they did go on with this, or perhaps they even bring it back now. Would it be something you would be interested in pursuing as a monthly comic?
Yeah, possibly. I mean, I think it depends on. You almost feel like I don't know. I don't know if I don't know if I jump in like on a trade or maybe I'd read that first issue. I kind of feel like because of the time it's been what, like 2 years or almost. If they were to do it again, is it better to pick up right where they left off, or should they just age the universe and maybe instead drop the Crosswind thing and just focus on all the characters and all their secrets and where that has gone? Because that to me by the end was the most interesting stuff. Yeah. Once the Crosswind reveal happens, then that's it. You can't go back to that, especially with what he does in this series. But the other stories you can, and any number of those characters could go bad if they wanted to play around with that concept. Vesuvius could certainly be a villain. We don't know what his secret is. The recluse, he has his issues, so that could be interesting. So I think that's where it could get interesting. It could be a breakdown of all the characters as opposed to just one.
Well, not only that, but they could have easily expanded the lineup, expanded the universe, and they did touch on that a little bit.
Oh, right,
with,
yeah.
There's one character. Well, there's basically two characters that show up. Although I was going to ask you about this if you knew which, particularly about one of those characters, if you knew if that character existed before or not. But so they started it a little bit. I like I said, I just think that this universe that they had just started to delve into had the ability to become something very rich and entertaining. And like I said, it's unfortunate that it didn't come to pass, but okay, so let's move into some issue perspectives. I only have a few notes about each issue because I didn't want to take 6 hours to talk about the series.
Right.
I did that once with Danger Club, and while I really enjoyed that, it was still it was a long time to sit and talk with someone about only 6. No, I guess it was 8 issues. They had 8 issues out of that. But anyway, it was. But that was a planned 8 issues. This was an unplanned 7 issues.
Right.
But so what, Peter? What do you have? What are your thoughts about issue 1? Is there anything in particular you want to talk about? Anything you want to point out?
It was a nice introduction to all the characters. You get all their secret. You get their superhero identities. You get their secret identities. When I went through that list of all the little secrets that each of them have, that's pretty much set up in the first issue. You get the Crosswind reveal. And a lot of the stuff that I wrote down, we've talked about some of it, that Crosswind is a mole. He's not a traitor, he's trying to gain their trust. And I thought that, it opens with him overlooking the front line doing a battle, but he holds off, right? He doesn't join right away. He's waiting for that right moment. And that reminded me of during the New Teen Titans run where Terra went up against Deathstroke in front of the Titans as a way to kind of gain their trust. And so right away I was like, oh yeah, I see that. I see that little riff. The big takeaway for issue 1 for me, it was kind of cool to see that the front line had a history, that there was a previous leader and a little bit of a different incarnation. And the group managed, again, when we talk about like this, how this book likes to play with superhero themes, it almost felt like, how like Watchmen has the Minutemen back in the early days of superheroes. And then in like the 60s, it has, the group is called the Crime Busters. And then when we read them, they're well, they don't call themselves the Watchmen, but that's sort of what they are, right? And I thought that was a nice little nod, almost like when you saw that earlier version of the front line, they almost looked a little more innocent, So that was cool. That was a nice thing. The opening fight that I mentioned with the villain called Perdition. Clearly, he's an Alan Moore guy, right? Like they're clearly making him to be Alan Moore.
Oh my God. I did not even think about that, Peter.
Yeah. I mean, he's got a beard. He's a crotchety old man. There's a snake god reference. And just the fact that it's very Cthulhu-like, just his magics and all that. I was like, oh, that's Alan Moore. That's supposed to be Alan Moore. And that was funny. I thought that was really funny. So
wow.
Yeah, good. And the other thing I had is, the headquarters being in that giant.
Yes.
Kind of like the Guardians of the Galaxy when their headquarters are in the giant celestial head. That was kind of fun.
Yeah. It's the giant is the alien creature that they battled 2 years before. when they joined, basically formed the team. And so the I was going to say dang it, what's the word? Carcass. That's the word I'm looking for. Carcass. It's kind of like the carcass of this alien creature, but it's not just a physical being. It's got all this machinery in it, and it's got these little creatures running around doing repairs, and now they are also like the Alfred to the team. You know, they serve them, you know, drinks in the headquarters, and I thought that was a really cool take on that whole concept. And it's just, and like I said, it's this giant, and it's standing there in the bay near Toronto, and it's, you know, it's got its arm raised with this giant sword, just kind of standing there menacingly to the city. But it's the front lines headquarters. And I'm thinking, you know, in universe, I would have liked to have seen this, but what would the city of Toronto and the nation of Canada's response be to having this thing that was or could potentially destroy the world, or at least their city, be sitting there, you know, for 2 years now, even though the hero group is there. Occupying it, that would just seem like a really weird thing if you were a citizen of Toronto.
I love the notion of superhero landmarks, which is why I think why that giant carcass works, because it's like almost like a given. You know, you got the Titans Tower in the middle of one of the New York rivers. You got, you know, Avengers Mansion just in the middle of New York, or the Baxter Building. And it's like, that's just a superhero building. So like, sure, true. You know, after the destruction of some giant coming down, you know, there's a giant alien in the middle of the water, because who's going to get rid of it? How do you get rid of it?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Go ahead.
I could just imagine conversations, you know, between Luminary perhaps and the mayor of Toronto or the prime minister of Canada going, "What are you guys going to do with that thing?"
That's actually touched on, that concept of, you know, what are you going to do with that thing is touched on a tiny bit in Spider-Man Homecoming. So.
Oh, right. Yeah. Okay. Well, so now, Peter, that's the second time that you've made a comparison to New Teen Titans and this book. So, do you think that they're drawing too much on New Teen Titans specifically? You know, they did mention that the Judas Contract specifically was a inspiration, perhaps, for this book. But or is it just because we're so inculcated with the New Teen Titans, you know, we two specifically, but you know, anybody else out there who read that series, are they just drawing too much on that, or are they playing around just enough with it? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's just enough. I think, I mean, I'm going to see it because I'm so immersed in it, but other people who aren't as immersed to it aren't going to see it. But I think it's just enough. I think it's a common superhero thing. It's just that the Judas Contract went about doing it in a way that wasn't normal. You know, we're used to heroes going bad. We're not used to heroes invading a team. And quite frankly, I can't think of another one after that has played so strongly since the Judas Contract.
Right.
You know? So, you know, like, okay, so Dark Phoenix, when she didn't invade the team, she just went nuts. Mm-hmm. She just went bad, you know, but it wasn't really her fault or whatever. But Tara is different. So no, I don't think it, I think the entire book is meant to evoke superhero stuff. I mean, you can't read the character of Recluse without going, oh, he's totally Bruce Wayne. He's Bruce Wayne that eats people, but he's Bruce Wayne. You know, I think they knew what they were doing. They knew what they were doing. They knew what they were doing, putting a speedster on the group. They know what role Punchline plays as being the comedy of the group. No, I think, I mean, and it doesn't, and it's not only the main team. I had the other notes from issue 1, like you had that character from the NSA, Anne, who wants information on the team. She's trying to use Luminary to get information from the team. Recluse is, not only does he have his secret, but he's inspecting his team as well. Not just Crosswind, but I mean, he's trying to find out information about his group. Harlot has this prophetic dream of killing. And I almost thought, that's a way to make him a bad guy too. Maybe the dream is that he's killing other members of his group. But, obviously that worked out a little differently. So they're setting up all these people in that first issue that I was like, okay, who hired Crosswind? Like, who was the mastermind behind it? I mean, I thought it could be Anne. What if it was the president? What if it was another teammate? It turns out to be the inspector, which was not one, that wasn't a character I even put on the list. So I thought that first issue built up nicely to try to keep us guessing as to who was behind it all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the inspector, in fact, is he's pretty innocuous in the story at first, and then you get that big reveal at the end. Like, wow, yeah, I didn't see that coming either, as I recall.
Yeah.
Another thing a couple of more things about issue 1. I just want to mention, Peter, before we move on. I really like the idea of how these characters, the frontline characters, interact with each other. They appear to me to be more of a work group, I was thinking about where I work. I work in an office. I work with all these different people, and I really don't know them intimately.
Yeah.
Right. We get together. We do a job. We're friendly towards each other. We have a common goal. But I don't tell them my deep, dark secrets, and neither do they tell me theirs. And I like that aspect, considering that maybe not so much now, but in the past, it seemed like the JLA, once you get past the original introduction of the characters, it seems like, Hal and Barry would hang out in their civilian identities all the time. Clark and Bruce were friends. They did things together. It just seems like the JLA especially. I'm trying to think of if the Avengers did that, in any sense.
To a degree, yeah.
Yeah, maybe not so much, but it seemed like they knew each other really well.
Right. And
I don't get the sense that these characters do. In fact, I don't think it's in issue 1, maybe 2 or 3, but Rundown makes an offhand comment about his scientific abilities, and everybody's like, "You're a scientist?"
Yeah.
And so they've been together for 2 years, and that hasn't come up yet. So I like that aspect. They don't really know each other that well either, but yet they're superheroes, and therefore they have a certain amount of camaraderie and respect for each other to be able to do the job that they do. And I like that. That concept I really enjoy. The other thing I just want to mention, and this is something that I only really noticed last night, Peter, when I was looking through the books in preparation for our talk. Issue 1 is the first time that we see this happen on the page, but it's repeated throughout other issues, where when Crosswind shows up and he's actually using his powers, Kyriazis moves panels, makes them off kilter. They're not straight on the page. Mm-hmm. And so there's that page where he first shows up and Luminary is, yelling out, "Crosswind, he's here." And then you get that strip. There's a strip of panels going down, and it's cockeyed a bit. It's like I said, it's not straight on the page. It's moved a little bit. And I thought that was a great way to denote, Crosswind's wind powers.
Yeah.
Blowing things off kilter, blowing things around. I thought that was a really cool visual thing that the artist did. And there's some other pages coming up that really take advantage of that approach to show that ability of that character. I thought it was really, really well thought out.
Right. It adds a little bit of freneticism to that page.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially since in that first issue, I mean, it's pretty much, straight on panel by panel in a grid format, until you get Crosswind showing up. But then in later issues, even, I want to say the second, or maybe it's the third issue. I can't remember. No, it's the second issue. There's this 2-page spread, of the characters battling something, these creatures. I don't know what it is.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. They're called the 5 stages.
Yes, that's it.
Yeah, they're meant to be like the 5 stages of grief.
Yeah,
or death or whatever.
Yeah,
it is. Yeah.
That was again interesting concept for some. Basically, it's throwaway villains, which pretty much that's what we have in here through this run is a bunch of throwaway villains, but still interesting takes on them. But there's that, like I said, there's this 2-page spread showing Niagara Falls and all the action going on. But what we get are these inset panels to zoom in on each character around this 2-page spread. And I thought that was a really cool way to do it, because it's the characters, where the characters are in the 2-page spread in the background, they're in there are these circles encircling them to show where they're at on this 2-page spread. And then from that, it expands out almost like an exclamation point. Mm-hmm. Shape to reveal what's going on there at that time. I thought that is I don't think I've ever seen anything like that.
Yeah, I like that panel a lot. And I actually wonder, there's another panel later. Let me see if I can see my notes where it is. In issue 7, where Rundown, it's a page with Rundown, and there's a panel that has an arrow pointing to him, that is stretching off one of the panel borders. And it had a very Carmine Infantino Flash aspect to it.
Oh, yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, and I almost wondered I wonder who this idea, where this 2-page spread that you're talking about, where it came from. Like, is Jay Faerber, is he so immersed in superhero art that he's like, hey, I want you to do this 2-page spread, and this is what we want to do? Because that's a very specific 2-page panel. I love that 2-page spread. I think it artistically is very interesting. It's interesting to look at. It's interesting to read. Like there's a clear order in which you're supposed to read it. It's not confusing. There's action. There's movement on the page. So you're getting a 2-page spread, and yet there's all these other places where your eye can go. I think it's one of the best pages in the whole group, in the whole series.
Yeah, I agree. It's a visual feast,
mm-hmm.
and I found myself several times when I've probably read through this series now 4 or 5 times, and I kept going back to this and just looking at that 2-page spread, and following along. It's really well done. I hadn't really paid attention to Kyriazis, his work,
mm-hmm.
Before now, and like I said, I read this 2 years ago, but after going through it again for this, I really want to find out what he's doing right now, and go buy it.
Well, I'll have to look it up.
Is there anything else about issue 2 that you want to point out?
I like the cover. The cover where it's
yes.
like this slanted breakdown of hundreds of blocks, hundreds of panels, and the 2 characters are sort of bursting out fighting. I don't know if you ever did you read Young Avengers when Kieran Gillen was doing it? And
oh yeah.
Yeah, and they did that a lot too, where they played around. It's very sort of metatextual, where there's a lot of white pages and the characters are breaking through the panel, or the background is all the comic pages of the series to date, and they're sort of standing on them. So it's like a visual reference of what you just read. So I like that. I like that about that cover. And
yeah. It's very eye-catching the way it's constructed.
Yeah.
With the muted color, the muted panels, the kind of bluish and black panels.
Mm-hmm.
And then you got the two characters bursting out in all this red and red, yellows and browns, I guess, just bursting through there. And they're fighting each other. It's Hellet and Vesuvius looking like they're going at each other, which does not happen in the comic. But it's like I said, it's very eye catching.
The other thing I liked about this issue, they reference other J. Faerber books like Noble.
Yes.
And they talk about Super Freaks in Chicago, which I don't know. Maybe that's Savage Dragon, or I wasn't sure about that one. And Recluse in this one, he's starting to get real suspicious of Crosswind, and not to go back to the Titans thing, but it felt like the way that the Raven was never really trusting of Terra during the New Teen Titans thing, but she never knew if it was because of Terra or was it because of what was going on inside her with her demonic father. And it's kind of the same here. Like Recluse has doubts not only about Crosswind, but also about the doubts that he has about Crosswind. So that was kind of nice. That was kind of a nice little throwback and a nice exploration of that character.
Mm-hmm. And since we're talking about Recluse, did you notice how his hood is translucent?
Oh.
So you can see, just for people who haven't seen this yet, but Recluse wears a mask where he's got these looks like 6 eyes, like a spider has multiple eyes, right?
Oh, yeah.
And he wears this gray hood over his mask too. It's a hood cape combination. And it's, like I said, the hood itself is translucent. So you can see the eyes of his mask showing through the hood. I thought that was a really interesting touch.
Well, I mean,
it's like webbing, right?
Yeah. And it makes sense too, right? Like that's always something that bothers me about people who wear hoods. How the hell do they see? It's cutting off their periphery vision, right?
Right.
But he's got 6 eyes and now he's got 6 eyes and a hood that he can see through. So that kind of actually makes sense.
Totally makes sense for that kind of a character.
Yeah. He's a very pulp-like character, right? He's like Batman meets the Shadow meets the Spider meets, whatever else.
Well, and since you brought it up, we find out later that Recluse has been around for quite a while. Mm-hmm. And has been known by other identities. I think he was called Doc Spider.
Yeah. And
so we see that a flashback just real quick in one of the issues where he's kind of like this I'm assuming a 1940s pulp type hero, like the Spider, like you mentioned.
Right.
So just those little artistic touches, those little variations of the familiar are just what I love about this book.
Yeah. And the one other note I have for issue 2, when Vesuvius and Hellet are talking, Vesuvius mentions a phrase. He says, this is the gift of reinvention, because they're two people who have very mysterious backgrounds, and they're trying to find their place in the world. And, we have been given a gift, the gift of reinvention. We can remake ourselves however we want to be, but we must accept who we are first. And that could go many different ways, right? Like you could be a villain and become a hero. You can be a hero. You can become a villain. I thought it was a nice little, small theme. I don't know if it doesn't really play out in these issues, but I feel like that could have been something that the creators would have played out after issue 7.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I definitely think it was foreshadowing what we find out would happen. Especially with Vesuvius.
Right.
Yeah. Those wonderful little touches that they're throwing in there. Knowing what we know now, which we won't get, but I think it was a very, very well constructed book. with the pieces that we have. Oh, since Peter, you brought up, what was it? Noble Causes, and what was the other one?
Dynamo 5.
Dynamo 5. Yeah. So I guess I know I was aware of those series, but I never checked into them.
Mm-hmm.
I never really knew what they were about. Until I got to, the reference here in Secret Identities, and then I started, well, I guess it was in the individual issues, when I was looking through those, there are ads, for, Faerber's work, in issue 3, at least. And I see Noble Causes. There's like 10 trade paperbacks.
Yeah.
And then Dynamo 5 has 5, and there's this thing called this one trade called Firebirds.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking, whoa, there's this whole superhero Faerber verse that I am not aware of and have not read. So now that I know about this, and having enjoyed Secret Identities so much, I'm gonna go find those books.
Oh, cool.
And read those.
Good. Yeah, they're worth it. They're definitely worth it.
I did. There is a reference here, or an ad here for Point of Impact that Faerber did with artist Corey Coronel that I did get. So it's weird that I got this black and white. I think it was a 4-issue series, maybe 5, that has nothing to do with superheroes, and yet here's all this other work by Faerber that is, and I just never got into it for some reason. It's bizarre to me. Anyway. So since I'm talking about issue 3, I don't really have that much about that. The one thing I wanted to mention to you specifically, Peter, was, there is a mention of Gaijin's color changes.
Mm-hmm.
And the first thing I thought of was Halo from Batman and the Outsiders. And it's not even remotely the same kind of thing as Halo, but just the idea of different colors meaning different things to a superhero character. That's where my brain goes.
Right.
And I wondered if you got the same reaction, or if you just had some other thoughts.
Yeah, I wasn't quite sure what to make of it. In terms of I guess a lot of it has to do just with like her alien nature, and maybe he would have expanded on that. But yeah, no, I almost thought it was even an emotional thing too.
Mm-hmm. I think it is. I think that's how they describe it later.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. So it was a nice little, and it was something that I didn't notice until like maybe this issue, like you talked about. I was like, oh wait, this is also the issue where you find out Rundown is a scientist. And I wrote him. Mm-hmm. I wrote exactly what you said. I said, boy, they don't really know each other, do they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess the plot of this issue is mostly concerned with the villain, which is called The Example, which is an interesting name. And I mean, it has to do with what's going on in the story, because someone makes someone is killed, and a reference is made how he has to be made an example of to others, and that's why he takes on. He's kind of like a Solomon Grundy type character in a way.
Yeah, he's like every monster character that got affected by radiation.
Yeah, and I have to say that first page splash of just that bad guy, the example. I love the color work of this, where the character, he's dressed in a jacket and work shirt, but he's white and yellow and flamey and black. His eyes and mouth are black, and it's just a really cool image, a nice design.
Yeah, I also liked the couple panels where the team actually go up against him. Again, it's like a nice, all those side diagonal panels,
mm-hmm.
With little panels in the middle to try to get some real sequential fighting going on.
Well, and again, this is a page where Crosswind's using his powers, all through the background of it as well. And so that goes again with what I was saying about issue 1 with the off kilter panels and stuff. So, and you see that also too on page 3, where Crosswind comes up against the example first. And then suddenly, we go from a splash page to page 2, which is another essentially, well, it's like 4 panels without, there's no real borders here except for the circular panel. And then you get into the 3rd page and Crosswind starting to use his powers. And again, everything's off kilter. It's, angled off, and you have these weirdly, partition panels. Again,
right.
I just like that. It's a nice signature, visual signature for this character.
And it keeps the book from being too static.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Helps to move the eye around.
If you're not really digging, I don't know, the characters or the designs of the characters or the plot even, at the very least, the way the panels and the pages are constructed, there's something interesting to look at. I think that's all I had on that one. Oh, wait, no. Back to the color changes with Gaijin.
Mm-hmm.
So, Peter, when I was rereading this and taking my notes, and I wrote that thing about the thing about Halo, my next note was, does this book just push my buttons? Is it good?
Right. And are you just attracted to it because it hits everything you like?
Yes. And I'm still kind of struggling with that a little bit. I think it does push my buttons. But is it good? I think yes. I think it stands on its own, but I still worry that, perhaps if you're not as into like New Teen Titans lore, maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm putting way too much on this book, because they've explicitly said that New Teen Titans was an inspiration, and I have a huge love for that book. So maybe I'm just, I think I need to shudder that away and really not engage that part of my brain, because it really wants to go there a lot reading this.
Yeah, no, I mean, the Titans thing is, I don't think it's as strong as you're making it out. I don't think that would alienate anybody from it. And I think, again, it goes back to, they wanted to make a book that resonates with a lot of the superhero tropes and a lot of the superhero comic tools and vocabulary, and I think that's why it hits. Mm-hmm. It's a good book. I mean, it's executed well. The artwork is good. The storyline makes sense. The characters are interesting. It's not Watchmen, but it's not trying to be Watchmen, right?
Right.
And
specifically not trying to be, because they did mention, in that first issue, Joins says something about, them not trying to deconstruct the superhero genre.
Right. And if you didn't read this book, it's not like you're missing out, but you could say that about anything, like I feel like, there's too much stock sometimes on reading books and wondering why they matter. And that's I'm usually the person that wants a book to matter, but that's because I want it to matter to the larger DC universe or Marvel universe, but this is Image. This is a standalone book. It doesn't have to matter in the larger picture. It just has to entertain, and it does. Like I would, if somebody said, I just want to read a real quick superhero story that doesn't, isn't so heavy, and I would recommend this. I think it works on that level. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think you're right. I mean, it's good. It's good. It's not changing the world, but again, they didn't want it. They just want to tell a story that that superhero comic fans would recognize and play with that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else, or should we move on?
Yeah, that's all I have for 3.
So 4, there's some really interesting things here. But why don't you go ahead and tell me what notes you have for the issue 4?
Well, this was kind of like we get a little bit of more information about some of the characters. What I liked about this one is that, we clearly see that there's something larger. There's a larger backdrop to the story. So it's not just about Crosswind invading the team, but those big giants, the alien giants, which in my notes I just called them the Celestials. They're coming to Earth, right? There's something that was triggered either by the carcass, the headquarters, or whatever, but they're coming back to Earth. And we even get, at the end of the book, an image that details some of the things that are coming out, not only in the remaining 7 issues, but in the potential rest of the book, because they thought the book was going to go on longer. Mm-hmm. And it becomes like a little bit of a nice scorecard. Like you look back at the image and you go, what have we seen? What don't we see? It's a nice little tease of things to come. We meet a new character called Ray de la Luz, who is, based sort of like a luchador character. I thought what was cool about that is like a rare splash page. We don't get like just big giant artwork. I mean, not always. We get some double page spreads and the splash page, like you mentioned last issue. But when it happened, I was like, whoa, big splash page.
Yeah, and such an interesting design too. The red, white, and green.
Yeah.
With the yellow highlights on the white. It's just that. Yeah, that was a really striking visual,
right, for
this character.
And then the again, to go back to that whole let's play around with the superhero concept. We clearly see that Gaijin has an origin very similar to Kal-El. Where she's like crash landed on what looks like a farm or something like that and is found in a rocket ship. So,
of course, yeah, things turn out very differently for her in terms of her upbringing, leading to, her quote unquote secret, which is her helping her mob connected brother.
Right.
On occasion, because it's family.
Right.
What are you going to do? The other thing I want to note about, I think was a major piece of this issue is Rundown again. He's running along. He not only does he have time to be a superhero with the group, he has 2 families with children. He also has a therapist apparently that he sees. And he was recounting to his therapist something interesting happened to him the day before, and that is he was checking his planner app that he's constantly looking at, mm-hmm. and realized that he had 10 minutes wide open, 10 whole minutes. And he was asked, "So what did you do?" And he said, "Nothing. For 10 lovely, beautiful minutes, I didn't do a damned thing, and it was the highlight of my week." I just thought that was apparently I really like Rundown, because I keep coming back to him in terms of some of these moments that are revealed in the book. Can you imagine having... I mean, yeah, he has super speed so he can do it, but like you said before, he ends up with having 3 families and being run down, and he has a job too.
Right.
What the heck?
Yeah, I like that. It was kind of nice to see. It's something you don't really see a lot of.
No, it's definitely not things that they touch on with the Flash for certain.
Yeah. I think that's all I had for 4.
Yeah, me too. You had pointed out some of the other things I was going to point out too. So, issue 5, we get more of a spotlight on Luminary, and this is we get more details on her secret, I guess, because someone made a movie of her life,
yeah,
or at least how she became Luminary, and the incident as portrayed in the movie is not quite what actually happened, and that haunts her. And I think she's ashamed of it. She's ashamed of her reaction, the fear that she went through when she was transformed. Not to mention her Secret Service detail that was killed during it, which, like I said in the movie, it's portrayed a little differently. But more importantly, I really liked how she reacts to that. So she's doing basically a press tour to help promote the movie. And she keeps getting asked all these questions. People are talking about the movie and how cool it must be to be her and, all that kind of stuff that you might expect. But, she's dealing with these memories of the actual incident. And then she does something unexpected. One, for being a public, as public a superhero as she is. And two, for being the United States president's daughter.
Mm-hmm.
She goes, I forget where it was now. She goes to some other country, flies to some other country, I think, or maybe some other town in the U.S. I don't remember now, but, and it's New Orleans. That's right.
Yeah.
And picks up this guy just in a bar.
Mm-hmm.
That's apparently how she blows off steam or just, avoids dealing with, her issues, I guess.
Well, it also goes to show how the team is not, as you said before, is not as connected as they should be, because she's, especially this issue and then next issue, she's basically shirking responsibility. She's hiding away. She doesn't answer the phone, right? I think that's this issue or next issue.
Yes. No, you're right.
Yeah. And she's like, no, you know what? I need time to myself, and is doing it, for whatever reason, for she just wants to be something else. She doesn't want to be the president's daughter. She doesn't want to be a popular hero that's based on a little bit of a fabrication, right? So, she knows that there's something about her that is a secret. And when I saw that, I was like, yeah, that kind of makes sense. That all these characters have feet of clay. All these characters have secrets, and that was her secret. That, you know what? Maybe she's not the red, white, and blue American hero that most people want her to be. Maybe she doesn't want to be that.
Mm-hmm.
So I like that about her.
Yeah, and that scene where, like I said, she goes to that bar, or sorry, not that scene, the scene leading up to that, where she's, it's being revealed to us what actually happened to her with the alien creature that basically grabs her, and then that's how she gets those what look like tattoos, those white tattoos on her arm, and then gives her the powers. I really, really like the way that the creative team shows that angst, the anger and the hurt of the character without it being spoon fed to us. She's not talking about it. She's not monologuing about it.
Right.
We just see her acting out in this case.
Yeah. I mean, and it's reflected on the cover too. I thought number 5 was my favorite cover, because it has a lot of story in it, where she's on the ground with her back against the wall, and on the wall is a poster of her movie. And she's all heroic in the poster, but in real life, I mean, she's missing a shoe. The power, her tattoos are going, they're all like smoking on her arm. And, it just was an interesting cover. I thought that was a lot of story in that cover.
Mm-hmm.
This issue also, not to go back to the Teen Titans, but Crosswind's visor has been slowly breaking down in the previous issues. He gets a crack in one of the early issues, and then it gets even more cracked. There is a cover where it's like all cracked. You can see his eye, and he gets a new visor in this issue. He gets a new headpiece, right? But I thought that slow process of breaking his visor, number one, obviously speaks to the character, right? Like it's a visual interpretation of how he's getting closer and closer to melting down. But if you know your Titans history, the way George Perez drew Raven early on.
Oh, yes.
She was very round-faced. She was very soft, very beautiful. And as the series went on, and he got a better handle of how to draw the characters, she became more gaunt. She became thinner, and her hairline was receding. And he freely admits in interviews, like he just was doing that until it became so noticeable that they made it a story point. And the reason why she was getting like that way, and she would start to wear her hood more often, is because her demonic father was slowly taking her over. And it was like this visual storytelling that came out of an accident. But seeing Crosswind's visor do the same thing, I was like, oh, I don't know if they mean this to be the way it is, but that's cool.
Mm-hmm. Wow, Peter, I did not know that about Raven and Perez.
Yeah.
I thought it was just they had this long-term idea in mind, and he just slowly built up to it. But that's not at all the case.
Yeah, no, yeah. I'd have to find it again. It's one of the early George Perez retrospectives I read. But I was like, oh, that's fascinating. That's really cool.
All right. Shall we move on to issue 6?
Okay.
Quite honestly, this one is, I don't know. There's really not much going on here in the first half of it, at least. It's more of a, people are looking for Gaijin's brother, whom Crosswind had kidnapped in an effort to sway Gaijin to help him gain access to I think they call it the central core of their headquarters. Anyway, again, I come back to the Crosswind pages when he's using his powers. There's this great page where he's basically killing Gaijin's brother, but all the panels are like breaking or flowing around the page as if they are caught in his whirlwind. Again, I just really like the way that the artist portrays that.
Yeah, this was definitely the issue that before I even read some of the text pages, I was like, they're not going to wrap this up. You know, because I knew it was only 7 issues, I was like, wait a minute. There's a lot that's going on here, and they're even revealing some subplots for stuff that might happen after issue 7. But we only got one more issue.
Yeah.
And then the giants attack at the end. And you're like, wait a minute. How are they going to wrap up Crosswind, Recluse, the giants, all this other stuff in just one more issue? Knowing that there is only one more issue, I was like, okay, clearly. And then I read the text pages for this issue or next issue and was like, oh, okay, I see.
Did you also notice the pages involving Recluse where he's starting to transform?
Mm-hmm.
Where they've got they went, we're talking a lot about the panel layouts and the and whatnot, but suddenly we got these spider themed additions to the pages. Some webbing that are basically connecting several panels.
Oh, right.
And then on a couple pages later, there's like this silhouette of a spider crawling along the bottom of the page.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and I guess it's at the top too. It's just thought that was weird.
Yeah, that if you ever read Infinity Inc. in the 80s.
Yeah, that's what I thought of.
Yeah, Todd McFarlane was the king of that kind of stuff.
Right.
He would just hang a cape on the edge of a corner of a panel for no reason, just to show a cape. Or if the Hour Man was in one of the pages, he would put little sand time things, whatever the hell they're called. What are those called?
Hourglasses?
Hourglasses, thank you. Yeah, he'd put little hourglasses all over the place for no reason, I like it though. Again, you can do that in comics, so I kind of dug it. I actually didn't notice the spiders until you just mentioned it. I just looked at it. I was like, oh yeah, right. There they are.
Well, so like I said, I thought of McFarlane's Infinity Inc. run but at least there he was kind of consistent in doing it. He did it for different characters.
Yeah.
But here it's just Recluse. It's only a couple pages. I just thought it was kind of especially the spider silhouettes. Though that's really weird. I can understand the webbing,
right,
holding together the kind of the panel, the 3 panels, like I said. But I don't. I don't know. A bit of maybe too much of a bit of creative license there, but
yeah. Well, think of it this way: well, like when we watch movies, the music isn't always playing, right? Sometimes they bring it in for effect.
That's true.
Or think of lighting, or I mean, you're sort of taking you like how every time Crosswind shows up, the panels get a little wonky, yeah. They twist around and stuff like that. Like I think there's something artistic about it in the sense of like, hey, let the situation or the character affect the surrounding page. And you're right that it is jarring in the sense that it hasn't been done a lot. And if it was done every 3 pages, that could get too much, that I could see that being too much. But on the flip side, when I don't know if you've ever read Cerebus by Dave Sim, he is always messing around with panel layout and panel design and page layout, and it's not distracting at all. It's actually quite beautiful in places, and other places you're like, oh my God, look at this. So yeah, I get it. But panel design is like lighting in movies, or not lighting, is like the frame of movies. Look how annoyed people got with Ang Lee's Hulk because he kept doing all those little inset panels and stuff like that. Where I look at it and I was like, you know what? That's actually quite bold to try to go that way, because movies were locked into this rectangle format, and why? Why should we? Why? Just for comfortability? That doesn't make sense. I thought that was really interesting to like see multiple angles at the same time. It kind of made sense. It was trying to evoke the comic book panel on a movie screen, and I'm not going to fault him for trying it, right? Whether it succeeded or not. So you can look at it like that, right? Like I always wish that comics were a little more experimental. Mainstream comics were more experimental in the way that they did their comics, because I'm sort of, I get bored with I really get bored with when they try to make it look like a movie, where it's constant horizontal panel after horizontal panel, and it's all widescreen, and it's like, okay, can you change it up a little, please? Like,
well, your point of comparing that kind of stuff to like the music in movies, totally get it now, because this is, we first see this, that it's just a little bit of webbing on the page, and he's just starting to transform, and then a couple of pages later he's transformed even more, and it's because the spider aspect of him is invading his, it's transforming him. It's coming into play. It's
closing in on him too.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I feel kind of embarrassed that I didn't catch that aspect of it.
Well, think of it this too. Maybe there's people who read this and were like, oh, he's a spider. Maybe they didn't catch all the clues earlier on, maybe they didn't look up what recluse actually means, and this could be their way of, because some people read differently. Some people are more visually perceptive. Like they'll read a book, but it helps the visuals help them more. Which is why I think color is very important, to set mood, and shadows are very important. So looking at that, maybe there's somebody that's like, oh, he's a spider. You never know.
That's true.
The other thing I liked about this issue too is the team is totally spread out. Like they're all over the place in terms of they're not together. They're all over the place in terms of even their loyalty, like look what's happening to Recluse, look what's happening to the other characters. Because at the end of the book, we get those really awesome double page spreads, because, everything is crashing down. The aliens have finally landed. It's like Crisis, it's like Trigon, whatever. And you're like, oh my God, the team's not even in their base to know that this is happening. Like that's what what you really said about the team doesn't know each other now resonates to me even more, because it's like, yeah, they don't. They're not a good team. They're good when they're together, but they're not so good about like, hey, where's the danger?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not a family unit like the Titans had developed into.
Yeah, I mean they were basically thrown together because they did good once.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and have they really learned?
And they continue to want to, but apparently they're not as successful with that.
Yeah.
Or they may, maybe this is a team that needs catastrophe to shine.
Yeah.
Which that would be an interesting way to or some interesting thing to examine for a superhero book. Okay. Anything else?
No, I think we're ready for the last issue.
All right. The final issue. So I just want to point out real quick, there was a 2-month delay in or between issues 6 and 7, and because they knew then that the series would be ended, but they wanted to like I said, cap it off, and it was an oversized issue as well. So before, the issues were $3.50 and a piece, and then we get a $4 comic for number 7. I don't know how many pages difference there are. I mean, it doesn't really matter, but this is the end of the series, and quite honestly, there's not a whole lot going on there other than a big fight with with the aliens. Luminary gets active. Her powers get like super activated because she was chosen by this other alien race to stop this invading these invading aliens. And so she transforms, which I thought, just from a visual standpoint, I liked that look. So she goes from the red, white, and blue costume to her. I'm trying to find the page right now. Where'd it go?
Where she's all just basically black with white.
Black and white?
Yeah.
It's like techno tattoos, is kind of how I think of it. But yeah, she's totally transformed. She says, the aliens that gave me my powers implanted some kind of message there. They said I'm a weapon to stop these things, a virus. So, that aspect too of her character, had this continued, that could have been an interesting way to examine how she deals with that.
Right.
I mean, bad enough what's already happened to her and how she reacts to it, but now she's basically a means to an end to an alien race. What does that mean for her?
Right. They all kind of go through like some big change that had this series continued. Would have been interesting. Like Recluse, because he was turning into a spider, needs to feed. He needs to feed, or he's going to change. So he sucks down on Gaijin's brother. Isn't that? I think that's what he does, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he has that secret. Like, oh, by the way, I ate your dead brother.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh boy.
Well, and at the end of this too, he Recluse does figure out that, who's behind Crosswind and that particular reveal, and basically conscripts the inspector to help him with his certain dietary needs, as he puts it.
Yeah. Yeah. What'd you think of the whole the reasoning behind why the inspector came to Crosswind? Why basically the whole seed of all of it?
Well, I mean, it's sad that his family died because, he blames the front line, although they would have been dead anyway, I would assume. So, okay, fine. The guy wants revenge, whatever. More importantly, I think, is what he brings up to Recluse, which is, you guys if you're not careful, basically, if you guys aren't careful, this is going to spin out of control, and you're going to cause more harm than good. What are you going to do about that?
Yeah.
So I wish we could have gotten more of that. More time. Had the series continued, would they have done this with the character of the inspector? How would it have turned out a little differently?
Right.
What kind of relationship would the inspector have with this group or Recluse in particular? So, but we'll never know. And
I mean, especially the way it ended, where they continue on as a team with some new members. Luminary is off in space, but they're continuing on hiding from the public the fact that Crosswind was a traitor, was a mole, was a bad guy.
Right. Yeah, that final page.
Yeah.
They're just all standing there looking out across the water, I guess, and there's a actual statue of Crosswind. Because as far as the public knows, he sacrificed himself to save the city,
right,
to help people out.
So now they have this other thing, like not only are they not already a strong enough team, but if they take the inspector's words to heart, or Recluse does, but they're also burdened with this secret that really they're almost built on a lie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was something that happened at the end of the Judas contract too. They decided not to reveal. There's a ton of Titans references in this. The way Crosswind dies he's basically buried by his own power is almost exactly like the way Terra dies. He even has a Terra tattoo on his chest.
I was going to ask you if you've seen that.
Oh yeah, I saw that
because I missed it the first time.
I was like, "Are you kidding?" I was like, "Boy, that's really on the nose there." Let me just tattoo Tara Markov on my shoulder. That's not going to say anything.
I thought that was a nice nod by the artist to.
Right.
Yes, we are playing with this. Thank you very much.
So yeah, it was a little bit of a choppy issue. It was a little bit of like, oh man, they're really rushing together all these things, but
yeah,
they managed to do it.
And like I said, that final shot, that final page too, like I think you mentioned already too. There's some new characters. We got the what's his name, Ray de la Luz. De la Luz, yeah. He's there hanging out with him. This is the character that I wanted to ask if you knew existed before this, and that is the Canadian Shield character. She shows up here to help out.
Well, I just looked up on Comic Book DB, and this is her only appearance in this series. So
yeah.
So he must have had other things.
I had looked that up too, but I also just did a general search, and there are characters called Canadian Shield, but they're it's existed in other publishers over the years. I just didn't know if this was a take on that character or if it was just one of those kind of happenstance things that sometimes happens in comics.
Yeah.
But that was I don't know. I like the design of the character with the Canadian maple leaf and as a shield, as an actual shield that she uses.
Right.
It's very superhero comic booky.
They always go to the whole maple thing, right? Like Alpha Flight did it.
Yeah.
Captain Canuck does it.
Yeah, that's true.
That's true. It's like, hey, there are some other, you could have a fire guy. You could have, somebody based on plants, or I don't know. Mm-hmm. Just a magician doesn't have to always be tied to Canada, but I get it. It's the first thing you always go for, right? Like, if you're going to have a guy from the UK, he's going to be Captain Britain. If it's going to be a hero from Australia, it's probably going to be kangaroo based. I don't know.
Or a boomerang.
A boomerang. Yes, exactly. Captain Boomerang.
So what does that mean for America? What is America to other countries? Captain America?
Captain America, Wonder Woman, and Superman. I mean, Superman basically is red, white, and blue, if you really think about it,
True.
But yeah, it's all patriotic stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. That's somebody's idea, or that's an idea somebody can run with. Get a bunch of characters. Oh, I guess they already did. Essentially, what was it? Is it the Global Guardians?
Yeah.
Is that what I'm thinking of?
Yep.
Yeah.
If you have
All right,
if you have someone from Ireland, they have to have a jack-o'-lantern. You know, like what?
Or a shamrock.
A shamrock. Yeah. Right. They did that with Contest of Champions.
Yeah, that's true.
I think her name was Shamrock.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. So there you go. That's unless you have anything else about issue 7, Peter.
No, that was it. I mean, the opening splash page was cool. This is where we get the history of Recluse, where he's like a Max Mercury type character, where every heroic era he seems to have a different secret identity, which is kind of fun. I did like that Hellet and Punchline in whatever page that is. They didn't, but they almost did a fastball special. Because Punchline was like, I think it was Punchline. She was gonna throw Hellet or Hellet was gonna throw her, but then something happened that they didn't do it. And I wrote, it's almost like the X-Men's fastball special. Like I wondered if they were trying to tease that. So that was kind of fun.
Oh, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But otherwise, it was a little bit of a disappointing last issue. Just because I was like, we don't even really get, you don't even really get the reveal of Crosswind.
Not to the group.
Yeah, it almost happens in spite of the rest of the story. It takes second fiddle to this alien invasion. Now, was that how they originally wanted this story to go, or is it just because of circumstance and they're like, we're going to have to merge all this stuff together? Mm-hmm. And it's like, okay.
I kind of think that's it's probably what happened.
Yeah. And
it's unfortunate.
And there is a moment where Crosswind has to be the hero. And I thought that was an interesting moment, but would it have been enough to change him? Nah, I don't think so.
I like to imagine that had they continued, of course, that he would have changed his mind in subtle and over a long-term ways.
He's such a bad guy, though. I mean, he's so...
In this one, especially this issue.
Yeah, he's killing people, and there's almost no turnaround. I mean, that's the thing with Terra, too, in New Teen Titans. There was no turnaround for her. Even Deathstroke was like, look, he said to change it later, there was no way, you were never going to save her. She was insane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, this series, like I said, I was really enamored with it when I first read it, and then when I was rereading it again, I was thinking, is there really something here, or am I just kind of reacting to familiar tropes that I love? And of course, there was I felt it ended way too soon. There was a lot of potential here, but it was wasted on unfortunately the series getting canceled. So
yeah. That's unfortunate.
I just want to mention too, the trade collects obviously all 7 issues, but it has no letter columns, unfortunately, but it does contain some extra art, some extra covers that weren't used. The original pitch, there's like a 4-page pitch that they came to or put together, showing all the characters, kind of giving introducing you to the characters. And it's also interesting, Peter. I don't know if in the stuff that you read, you saw this, but when they show Crosswind, he's in a more traditional looking superhero outfit with a mask and cape, and he's smiling at the group, and it just he looks very green, like a very much a new superhero who's been asked to sit at the adults table. So I thought that was kind of neat to see that. Yeah. And you get a bunch of character designs, showing us different suit combinations and different color combinations. And I love that kind of stuff. I love seeing that.
Yeah, I like when they put in extras like that.
again, I'll go back to Rundown, apparently because I didn't realize this until now, but he's my favorite character. But there's a couple panels here showing the different colors and suit designs, and they're very colorful. One, is blue and yellow, yellow and purple, blue and white. But then they went with the darker one that they have in the book. Going away from, I guess, more flashian type concept. So, like I said, I like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So it pays sometimes to get the trade and the individual issues, I guess.
Double dipping.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I plan on, like I said, I got the trade first. I actually talked to Brian Joines at Rose City Comic Con last year. I was just walking the show floor and I see him over there. I'm like, wait a minute. Isn't he the guy that wrote Secret Identities? And I actually had to look it up. I pulled out my phone and looked it up real quick. Oh my God, that is the guy that co-wrote Secret Identities. So I went right over to him. No one was at his booth. There wasn't much going on there. And I'm like, dude, I love this book. And he was very gracious about it. It comes out that he actually went to school in the city, the neighboring my own. Yeah, small world. But then he sold me his own work. I think it's called Imagine Agents.
Okay.
I want to say that. So I have yet to read that. I need to read that before I go back to Rose City this year. And I'm taking all of my individual issues to have him sign. So I'll have that at least.
Cool.
Anyway, I think that's it. I think that's all I have to say about this concept.
Yeah, if you're somebody that doesn't want to get, fully immersed into some large superhero universe, this is good. Like, you could read this and enjoy the artwork and get I think if anything, it works negatively in the way that it makes me like, I would like to read more about Recluse. And I want to know what's the truth behind Vesuvius.
Right. The details of the rest of the group's secrets. We don't get that. Vesuvius, Hellet, who else do we not get? Is that it?
Like Rundown, like like I want to. That could be an interesting limited series.
Oh yeah. And then there's Punchline. Did you get a sense that there was maybe more than just that she's ashamed that she's a failed comic? Because that seems to be her secret in this book, in this 7-issue run.
Yeah, and then she decides to finally reveal herself. I guess it was more that her bravado is all a front because she's actually a failure in her real life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, and so that in its, speaking of, expanding on what's there that we didn't get, the fact that she reveals her identity, reveals to the world that she is Punchline. And then as we found out in one of those panels, her stand-up routine is sold out all over the place. And she's making the rounds on late night TV and all that stuff. But, that wouldn't have happened if she hadn't come out.
Right.
So what does that really mean for her, in terms of her inner psyche? Anyway, I guess I could pull out more and more examples of things that I would have liked to have seen had this series continued.
Yeah. The wishes and the wants.
Yes. But like I said earlier, at least now I have, I have the opportunity to go read more of Faerber's superhero work. So, there's more superhero comics that I've not read that a superhero universe that I can explore. So I'm now looking forward to that.
Cool. Yeah, I think you'll like it. I've read a few Noble Causes trades, and Dynamo 5 I was picking up as it was coming out, and the artwork is really beautiful in that.
All right. Well, Peter, thank you so much for joining me for this discussion.
Sure.
I appreciate that. I always enjoy talking. I just enjoy talking with you in general. But talking comics with you is always informative and a delight.
Cool. Thanks for the recommendation.
All right. I guess that's the end of the episode. Peter, do you want to remind everybody where they can go find more about you and your show, your fantastic show?
They can go listen to the Daily Rios at thedailyrios.com. You can subscribe through iTunes. I also now have a separate feed for the Tower podcast, which is a New Teen Titans podcast. You have to do a search for the Daily Rios or the Daily Rios Presents, and then the Tower will come up. But now you can subscribe to that as well. There's only 16 episodes so far. I'm up to issue 9, I think, in New Teen Titans. So you can listen to the first 7 or 8 issues, and that covers the first trade of the New Teen Titans that DC has released recently.
Ah, okay.
And then, because I am slowly in the process of getting back to that as well. My New Teen Titans podcast, so I can talk about the old Wolfman Paris stuff, but then I can also, there's a lot of new Titan stuff coming up, like with the Young Justice cartoon. There's a live action Titans TV series coming. It's like, oh boy, I better catch up, or at least I better continue. So,
yes, you should, Peter.
Yeah. And you, what was the first New Teen Titans issue? What was your first New Teen Titans issue?
Well, I bought, when it was released, I bought that DC Comics Presents that had the preview in it. But the actual first issue that I bought of the New Teen Titans was, I think, number 23. Right.
Yeah, I thought it was somewhere up around there. If I ever get this, Skype thing going that we were talking about off the recording, there's a couple other people that have written in that have said, "Oh, this was my first New Teen Titans issue. This was my first New Teen Titans issue." So if you know that one is yours specifically, I'll bring you on for that specific issue, and then. Because I think there's something interesting about the first comic you pick up of a series that's ongoing, right? Like I think it means something. Like mine was New Teen Titans 28, and it means something, Like, and I can think of other titles like that specific issue was my first issue, and it always kind of speaks to it, So whenever I get to it, and it'll be probably a while before I do. But if not, I'll bring you on for that issue, and we can talk about that issue.
Oh, that would be excellent. That'd be very cool.
Cool.
All right. And you can also find out more about other episodes that I've done by going to longboxreview.com and click the podcast tab. You can also, if you want to, if you've read Secret Identities, or you read it after listening to this, even though now you know pretty much everything about the series, you still go back and read it, and you have some thoughts you'd like to pass along to Peter or myself, you can always email me at longboxreview@gmail.com, or leave comments at the blog as well. Please do so. I'd appreciate the feedback that I get on these episodes, and I know Peter does too. Peter, I know you often have referred to over the years as I've been listening to you on CGS and on your own show. You have this phrase about listener feedback. Something about currency.
It's a phrase from Derek Coward,
okay,
of the Comic Book Noise podcast, where he says feedback is the currency of podcasters, and that's so true.
Yeah,
so true.
Yeah. All right. Thank you again, Peter. I really appreciate your time and your insights, and I look forward to us talking again.
You bet. I appreciate you letting me play in your sandbox.
All right. Thanks, everybody. That's it. I will talk to you later. Bye-bye.